Good afternoon, everyone, and we want to welcome you to this regularly scheduled meeting of the Friendswood Downtown Economic Development Corporation. It is Tuesday, October the 11th at 4 o'clock. This meeting is called to order, and we have a quorum present. The first item on the agenda is number 2, public communications. We like to hear from the public quickly in our agenda, and that's a good thing. So, would anybody like to address the board? Thank you, Luis.
Thanks for your time. My name is Luis Briones, and I'm here on behalf of the Tree Legacy. And that's a group of local citizens and business people dedicated to, I guess you could say, making something good out of something bad. And what we've done is taken the felled trees that were at the parsonage across from the Friends Church and are going to be doing an art installation with those on the church property, about a block off of the Main Street here in downtown next to the Perry home. And so far, the Historical Society has provided us with the insurance, and the Rotary Club of Friendswood has provided the initial funding for the project. And so what I'm here for today is just to ask for a spot on next month's agenda where we could come and speak to you about this in more detail and answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. With public comment, we really don't engage, but we hear your request to have it put on the agenda, and we will address that later.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thank
and
you
we will
very
let you
much.
know. Well, there was an interrupted 6 to 2.
Oh, no.
Um,
Are we winning or losing?
Not positive.
Yeah. Not to the affirmative.
Not to the affirmative. Anyone else for public communication? Thank you. Item 3 are the minutes. A is to consider the approval of the minutes for the Friendswood Downtown Economic Development Corporation meeting held on August the 9th, 2022. If you remember, we did cancel the September meeting because there was nothing new to be presented that could not be communicated via email. And we are very cognizant of people's time, so that's why we did not meet in September. Do we have a motion or any comments or questions regarding the minutes?
Move to approve.
Thank you. We have a motion to approve and a second. Any other comments, questions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed?
Did we not have 2 minutes?
No, sir. Our last meeting would have been in August, and we skipped September. So at the August meeting, we actually had two sets of minutes that were approved there.
Thank you. We have, the minutes have been approved by unanimous vote, 5-0. Business item 4A is to consider the election of officers for president, vice president, and secretary treasurer, and the appointment of an assistant secretary. This is a yearly thing that we do, and we try to share the wealth as much as we possibly can and give everybody an opportunity to serve. So, what is the wish of the board? Yes.
Madam Chairman, I move that we keep the current officers for another year, and we discuss the idea of an assistant secretary separately.
I like where his head's at.
Thank you for your input,
That's a vote of
gentlemen.
confidence.
That was not, that was a second, so, and I appreciate, that's very kind. So, we have a motion and a second to continue with the slate of officers as they stand. That would be Bubba Johnson serving as vice president, Paul Marks as secretary treasurer, and myself, Rebecca Hillenberg, as president.
Are you okay with that, Rebecca?
I'm fine with that. Thank you, and I do appreciate the vote of confidence. Thank you, that's very kind. And I appreciate you asking, thanks. With that, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign, none. The vote is 5-0, and the slate of officers remains the same. Thanks, guys. That was very kind. Thank you. Now, to discuss the appointment of an assistant secretary. And my question becomes the purpose of the assistant secretary.
So the corporation can select an assistant secretary to help complete some of the work of the board that the board members may not necessarily be able to complete themselves. So in this instance, it would be city liaison, city staff. I would point to Ms. Harbin as probably being the best assistant secretary that we have if anybody wanted to make a motion, but that's up to the board.
I appreciate your input, and I think that's an excellent recommendation. Mr. Marks?
I'll make a motion to approve Aubrey Harbin for the assistant secretary position.
I was going to put my name in the hat on that job, but I'm dyslexic, so I'm going to vote for Aubrey as well.
Is that for the job that starts at 4:02?
Yes.
Got it. Okay. You had to be sitting up here to hear the
Yes,
rest
ma'am.
of that conversation.
Don't put that in the paper.
No. Anyway, the motion and second are to have Aubrey Harbin be our assistant secretary. Any other comments or questions? That would be great. Aubrey, are you good with that? Sure. All right. I thought I'd at least ask.
I do think it's decent when you're volunteering people for stuff that they at least consent to it.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, that's the right thing to do.
Otherwise, it's a voluntold.
It's correct. Which you can get up here.
Yeah.
Yes, you can. Are there any other comments and questions before we vote? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. The vote is 5-0, and Aubrey, we appreciate you being willing to serve.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And you do a lot of the job that we don't do up here and have already. So,
Another feather in your hat.
for business item 4B, we are to consider a resolution establishing the guidelines for consideration of requests for funding from the Friendswood Downtown Economic Development District Corporation. We know what brought this to need. And just to give you a little history, we've had some requests come to the board about using some of our funds to fund other items, and we need to vote and decide what we did with those. Well, in order to make that more standard, we asked Dr. McGinnis and Mr. Cox to draft a proposal for us, and this is what's in front of us now. So, Dr. McGinnis, may I just turn this over to you and you can talk about the draft?
Yes, you may.
Thank
Thank you. Ron and I created a draft, which we thought was perfect. And then we sent it to ultimately our city attorney, who made some additions to it, and then it came back to Ron and I, and we said, gosh, it sounds too legalistic, and it's really meant to be just guidelines for the board, not to, forget the phrase that we used, we did not want to create a grants program, something that formal. So we had then a second draft, which both Ron and I thought was spot on to capture our concerns and make it consistent with other language necessary for policy. So I believe that was sent out in email. Are these the salient points that we're reading now?
Yes, sir. So the resolution ultimately is what came about, and that's what was sent out in the email for in the backup material. Here is just the kind of the bullet point version of what's inside that resolution. Before I move on, I would like to thank not only Karen with her assistance, but Dr. McGinnis and Ron helped out a ton, trying to get me out of the weeds and get me where I needed to belong. So I appreciate that. So just for the resolution, to establish the guidelines, the kind of the process that would be run through is that any applicant would submit a written request to the board that would come through, in this case, city staff. And so we would make sure that request is brought to you if it's consistent with the bylaws, the downtown improvement plan, and state law before it would be placed on a future agenda, just as a work session item. So at that meeting with the work session, there will be no action taken by the board. That gives the opportunity for questions, and it gives the opportunity for the board to direct staff regarding any kind of proposal. At the meeting where the request is considered, if it gets that far, the board can approve in whole, in part, or deny the request. If the board approves the request, it will be placed on the next city council agenda for approval, just like any of y'all's approvals currently happen. And if it's approved, the FDDC will enter into a performance-based agreement with the requester. That is just a fancy way to say that basically there's going to be some deliverables to the board and to the city council, and if those aren't met, then a request for the funding will be made to return the funding. In a nutshell, that is the resolution that was put together. To Dr. McGinnis's point, I think it does take some of the historical significance of the guidelines that were needed and that were requested, and kind of puts them into a resolution that makes sense for everybody.
And I would further comment, it just gives us a little more space to evaluate things. A few weeks ago, they did have town halls regarding the idea for the former fire station area. So I just think it's prudent not to get a proposal and make a decision that night. You know, we spent months designing our plan, and let's just have a little breathing room to evaluate the proposals that come to our attention.
I mean, I think it's very step-by-step sequential and brings it to the board in a timely manner, but yet not immediate. Any other comments or?
I want to thank everybody that worked on it. This absolutely need to be done based upon some past experiences, and my guess is we'll have those experiences again. I think one's coming. But you need to have some kind of guidance on how it's going to be handled, I would think. And I mean, ultimately, I know the council approves it, but we should ferret that out before it goes to them.
Any other comments, questions? This is an action item. Do we have a motion?
I move.
Thank you. Jeff?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the proposal as presented for the guidelines to establishing how we would consider an item brought to the board. And any other comments or questions?
No.
Okay, hearing none. With the motion and the second, all those in favor of the guidelines as they have been presented, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. The vote is 5-0 in favor of the proposal. So. And did everybody hear that? No. Well, the last vote could have been 6-3, but we don't have 9 people here, so our vote was 5-0. Did I just sort of slide that in there? Thank you. Thanks. We're now going down to reports, and we're working, Madam Secretary, Madam City Attorney, we're working really hard to play by the rules. We just know that, we are. But we are still sort of wanting to know how the playing is going.
Put this in the minutes. Put this in the minutes.
Oh, yes.
For 13.
Well, and Mr. McGinnis?
I would
Dr.
like to
McGinnis,
note
excuse
that it
me.
is 4:12. What is that, 4:12?
4:13.
Ron, you missed my joke from earlier.
Yeah, you did, but it was
I
okay.
must have been the brunt of it.
No, you started the joke,
Oh.
but you weren't the brunt.
Oh, okay, well, good.
We'll get to
Sorry
that
I'm late.
later.
Sorry I'm late.
I know that. Thank you for that apology. We are ready almost for reports, but to bring you up to date on the last item which you were involved in, Dr. McGinnis, would you tell him what we just did?
We just voted to approve our policy guideline for future requests of our body,
Very good, thank you.
and you were thanked profusely.
Oh.
Yeah,
You
so-
both were.
But, yeah, hopefully both, because Dr. McGinnis did most of the work. I just did a little editing here and there. So,
Well, it was well presented and we appreciate it.
well done.
Thank you. Ready for reports? Mr. Ray?
Yes, ma'am. So item 5, reports. The first item up is to receive the TxDOT curb ramp, sidewalks, and traffic signals project report. It seems like a broken record, but the majority of the sidewalk has been completed. To date, all the signal cabinets, the electrical meters, and the pedestrian signals are all in place, and those are the crosswalk lights and signals, so those are in place. The final wiring is being installed with the testing to be beginning soon. Those are the timelines that we received is soon. And the downtown street signs have been placed on the new mast arms. Everyone's seen those, and you may have been able to now see the cross streets have been installed as well. And so I went out today and took a couple of pictures. So these are the ones that the FDEDC supplied to our Public Works Department that has installed them. And if you'll notice that they've been, the stop signs were slated to be replaced already. And so we went ahead and replaced those and placed a new black mast arm or a new black pole for the stop signs to go ahead and match the mast arms as well.
That looks great.
So at this point, the stop signs, the poles, the street signs, the black mast arms, the pedestrian signals have all been replaced, are all black powder coated, and everything has the matching orange and brown signs.
Looks very nice. Looks very nice. And we did inform, just to keep everyone up to date, we did inform City Council of this at the annual report, which was at the last City Council meeting. We talked about this.
Do you have some unfortunate news about the project, its current status? So TxDOT has gone out and taken a peek at some of the pavers in certain sections. They are not necessarily happy with the contractor's work on some of the settling and unevenness. So they've been working with them over the past month or so to try to come up with a solution. The contractor and TxDOT have gone back and forth with the proposal of doing stamped concrete in lieu of pavers. This would have been from the beginning, it's a whole lot easier, but this would now mean removing all of the existing pavers and going back in with stamped concrete. Ultimately, the stamped concrete will look the same as pavers. It will have the same visual appeal, and it'll be the same color. It does just mean some extra work. And city staff, it does have some concerns, one with the installation on how it goes in to make sure it does handle the conditions. And then two, future maintenance, if we do have a section that's not pavers that can just be reinstalled by city staff, we would have to have either a template for the stamp, or we would have to have somebody come out and perform the stamping, which is an additional cost to a basic generic sidewalk repair. So we actually have a meeting set up with them in the next couple of weeks to go through the installation and the future maintenance, and hopefully by November it can bring something back.
Steve, I think we have some questions. Paul, I see you.
When you say stamped concrete, you mean they're gonna pour concrete and stamp it? It's not gonna be like a stamp paint? Because there's a lot of areas that are real inconsistent, where you have pavers, then you don't have pavers.
Correct.
And so it just,
So anywhere that pavers were installed as part of the TxDOT project, they would be removed. New concrete would be poured, stamped, all in large sections. If you recall, those ribbons of pavers aren't very wide, so concrete's gonna go a long way. And so as they go through and do the new installation of concrete, they would be stamping right on top of it along with the color as well. So any large section would have a very common color and a common pattern.
So when you say color and stamping, the concrete will not be dyed all the way through. Is that what I'm hearing?
That
Or
is
it
some-
will just be,
That is something I do not have the answer to. We've had both conversations. There's two application types. One is the concrete itself is dyed, and one it is basically a powder that's kind of tossed on top before it's stamped. The staff's recommendation is to have it colored all the way through, and then also to please give us a copy of whatever stamp template you use, even if it's generic, so we can have it. And so just so the group knows, our engineering department, who's on top of everything, is requesting that the new concrete, before it's poured, is doweled into the existing concrete somehow instead of just poured on top. That way we don't have any separation issues in the future.
yes. Trey?
My comment, that's why Rebecca's the president. So when you coat pavement like that, it's also on the surface, it fades real bad, or it flakes and it wears. And if you don't dowel that runners on the outside into the other one, can pivot at different times, and then you end up with a buckle in there. So I know you're super smart, but if we can get the dye mixed into the concrete, when it does flake off, at least it's similar colored underneath.
Correct, and that is exactly what this meeting is about. We want to make sure that one, it's done correctly, and then two, the longevity of the project, so we're not coming back in a year.
Well, and if go ahead, I'm sorry, Pat.
Is the contractor absorbing the cost of this redo?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And if part of what the issue is the settling and the movement of those, we want to make sure that in the document that they're submitting for us to approve, or you to approve, that it's pretty clear that they're guaranteeing that this new process will not do the same thing.
So this would be a basic poured concrete, so it should settle and it should not have an uneven surface outside of what they stamp on it.
Okay.
And so it will be leveled. That is part of the reason TxDOT is having the issues that they are, is because if you recall from the very beginning of the project, ADA compliance was a very large issue, and so having these types of gaps or rises in those pavers is what's causing them concern.
Comments?
I'm surprised the contractor's eating it.
That's according to TxDOT, that the contractor is making up for the mistake on it. I think it has to do with how the project was bid. It was bid with the sand base and the pavers with the confirmation that it was going to even out, and it just hasn't.
I think we got lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only concern I have is when you use the color pigmentation in the concrete, it can vary in color drastically depending on how much you put in. So that's one of my concerns, make sure it's consistent.
Any other comments or helpful suggestions? Hearing none. Thank you, Stephen.
On the entire report or just this section?
Just this section. Go ahead, Bubba. If
Are you sure?
Yeah, I'm sure. Let's do it.
We talked earlier about, or you mentioned earlier, the signal cabinets that were going in. Have you noticed League City and other small towns that got their signal cabinets painted up with really pretty stuff? Is that what? Do you know any background on that? Is that local artists doing it, or is there some sort of standard or something, or what?
I'm not familiar with the ones in League City, but I have seen them in other communities. Here, we would have to get the approval of TxDOT to have those painted, and then it's just a matter of a program in place to either invite artists or to get them painted professionally.
Okay.
League City maintains all of their traffic lights now because of their
Size.
population.
Oh yeah, they hit over the
When we
population.
break 50,000, we will too.
Yeah.
Which
We will.
won't be long.
That is something I'd like to see.
I think it looks really nice.
It
And
does.
just a stainless steel box.
We can definitely reach out in one of our numerous upcoming meetings with TxDOT and see if there's something that, if we have an opportunity, being that they still control and maintain those signal boxes, if there's a program in place where we can see about
Perfect.
sprucing this up a little bit.
Quick question, are the League Cities stainless steel they're painting on?
Yeah.
Really?
It's a standard signal cabinet.
I think it's hard to get paint to stick to stainless steel.
It is. And stay.
Yeah.
It's got to be.
can prime
It's got to
it.
be prepped
Yeah,
Yeah, you
you'd have to put an undercoat on it.
and
Well,
an etching
probably-
epoxy primer.
Yep.
Yeah, it
And-
can be done.
And if we do consider, or if it were to come to doing it, Stephen, could we also, how do I say this nicely, other than, could we make the box designs be juried, or people would submit their box designs, that they aren't just,
They aren't just orange.
yeah, they aren't just orange and, you know, it's not the kindergarten class
Yeah,
from
yeah.
Bright Beginnings at the Methodist Church. I don't mean to say anything against that, but
Can definitely look and see if TxDOT allows it, and two, what their requirements would be. Seeing that there's no local program, I would think that if this group wanted to head that up and create a program, then that's a possibility.
Good.
Then it would just be a matter of meeting any requirements from TxDOT and any requirements set forth by the program.
Yeah. And I'm fully aware we got other projects that are standing in line now, but I wanted to get that in the hopper.
I think it's a good idea. It doesn't happen unless we talk about it and bring it forward.
I'd also be precautious on releasing that to just everybody. You're gonna have a picture of my kid in his jersey on one of those. So, I mean, we could also consider having a local artist create them for us. later.
We have plenty of artists here.
I mean, there are some really good people, and you could get stuff maybe you wanted, rather than a picture of someone's cat.
Well, and,
Sally knows a few artists.
Well, I mean, there's some people.
no, truly,
There's many
and-
here.
Paul knows one as well, like his wife.
yeah. So, but I think, rather than just making it arbitrary, we need to have a process.
Yes, ma'am.
And it's much like we just created a process for the
Yep.
submitting of ideas, so.
By the way, it's the bottom of the 8, 6-3.
What?
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Bottom
We
of the
didn't
8?
vote, we didn't vote on that.
Bottom of the 5th, I'm sorry.
There we
I
go.
was-
5th.
How did it get,
Bottom of the 5th.
City Secretary? We have been taking some unusual votes during this meeting. And the last one was a 6-3, even though we only have 5 up here. And so we're trying to be very careful.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, if you're wondering what we're talking about.
No, ma'am, I'm sure you guys have it all under control.
Well, between all of us, we're working hard, and I appreciate your understanding as the Astros are in the playoffs.
I just hope our home viewership is below 3 today.
On that note, Stephen, I think we've pretty well covered A, and let's go to B, which is the illumination.
Yes, ma'am. So there is a little bit of progress, as predicted by the group, that there are a few streetlights that have conflicts with some power lines. One side of the street is more conflicted than the other because of the power lines themselves. We have been working with a bunch of different entities. Pfeiffer, who's the contractor that was chosen, the engineering firm HDR, Gandy 2 Lighting, and Structura, who is the manufacturer of the poles themselves. So I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware that there is a possibility as we move through for a decrease in some pole heights, some adjusted illumination levels, and modified luminaires. Good thing is we have not lost our place in queue with for fabrication because of just the lead time that it takes to get there. So anything that's modified can be programmed in, and we can move forward. We are working, as you can imagine, we're working very hard, but every change gets another 3 or 4 questions. So the height of a pole can change how bright the light itself needs to be, and so we're looking for different solutions for depending on how many conflicts there are and what those conflicts are. So main thing is to keep the height and the illumination all fairly uniform, and then the aesthetics overall too, to make sure both for the street lighting and the pedestrian lighting, everything's taken care of. Hopefully by November, we'll have some pretty hard examples of what we can move forward with, if not before.
And Paul, I know you went out there and worked with just,
I just met with, briefly with the city and with Pfeiffer, and just made them aware that there would be conflicts. And so I'm glad that Stephen had recognized that early on, and I think Texas, New Mexico, I think we're involved as well.
That's correct.
But, okay, that's my main concern, to make sure that we don't have any code violations.
Exactly.
So, that's good.
Mr. Cox?
So, you said a few, and that says many. So I'm wondering about how many you're thinking about.
Probably, I do not have an actual number count, and I think when I wrote this a few days ago, part of it was based upon the fact of keeping the aesthetics remotely the same. So I just being with along with the ride with the board for a little bit, trying to keep the aesthetic side of things. So having a very tall pole next to a short pole, or 2 short poles and then a very tall pole, and then having everything across the street in a totally different manner, kind of haphazardly, was not the progress that we're looking for when I spoke with the groups. So having some kind of uniform, whether it's block by block or whether it's run by run, whatever it needs to be. One of the other goals is to have all of the same light pole locations, so we're not hunting down trying to install lights at new locations. And hopefully, while we don't have any confirmation, the reduction in any kind of pole length may also give us a cost savings as well as we move on. So not that it's the benefit that you wanted to get at the end of the process, but it may be an added benefit.
So you don't know yet?
No, sir, we do not. Long way to say I don't know.
Okay, you have listed on here, we haven't lost our queue with the manufacturer. What is the, Deb, what is the last possible date that we can make adjustments?
We need to have almost everything with Shakshura pinpointed, at least for polls, by the end of November.
One other quick question. I noticed on the traffic signal streetlights, some of the lights are turned backwards. Are those gonna be in conflict with the overhead power lines? Are those gonna have to be removed? I don't know. Some of those, there's not room to rotate them around. I believe they have them rotated toward the side streets right now.
If you can shoot me the intersections, I can make sure to follow up.
I think some-
I haven't noticed them, but if they're not working, I'm not
Yeah,
looking.
I
I'm not
think
looking at those.
Yeah, because I would think they would be oriented toward the intersection, and they're backwards on the pole.
Okay.
right now.
For sure.
Good observation, thank you. Any other comments or questions on 5B? Looking at 5C, is received the Friendswood Downtown Economic Development Corporation Financial Report for September. There we are.
So just real quickly, the beginning fund balance for September 2022 was $2,856,454 with a revenue of $61,212. The normal expenditures for staff services of $1,334 results in an ending fund balance, that should say September, for $2,916,332. Just keep in mind, this does not have the $2.3 million adjustment for the streetlight contract incorporated.
You know, if y'all weren't taking any money, we'd have over 3 million. That was just a
What?
comment. That wasn't a question.
Revenue's up.
That's great.
A six,
Yeah, that's
a
great.
6 handle, we don't get a lot of that.
Yeah, that's great.
You know, sometime, and I'm not trying to create work, Stephen or Aubrey, but sometime it might be really interesting from the beginning of this corporation to where we are like at the end of the year, like have data points every 6 months as to what the average city tax brought in was or whatever. I know it's a steady increase, but it might be interesting to see it. Would anybody else be interested in? Okay. We did.
I
We
could tell you
started-
by heart because I'm a weirdo on numbers, but it was in the 40s when we started.
That's what Dr. McGinnis
He's
was
right.
saying. It was in the 40s, and we were grateful for the 40s. But
A 50% increase in any income stream is a lot.
Absolutely.
especially over this number of years.
Yes, ma'am.
And Pat,
Question on the transfer to the general fund. Will our new assistant secretary require more funding from our budget?
No, sir. That $1,334 that are paid for city staff services will remain the same.
Just so you know, Bubba and I had already discussed that over here and weren't going to bring it up. And we were going to go with don't ask, don't tell. But now we've clarified it. And we were right. I said, they're not going to bill us for that.
Aubrey, you're being very considerate
She's very
with all of this. Very considerate.
What about
All right, any other comments or questions about the financial report? We're doing great. This is exciting. We have covered all of the business of the meeting today. And we are to number 6, which is adjournment.
I do want to say this. I know we don't have the comment section, but I look at those street signs out there and the colors and the poles and our light poles, and I wish we could jerk those stupid old ones down that are burying them because it looks good.
It does look good.
And I promise you, I know somebody's not going to like it, but he's an Aggie. He's supposed to be maroon. But they look good because I saw some social media comments about who chose orange. You know what? I think it looks way better than green. And I didn't know it was going to feel that way. But I don't know if y'all seen them, but I'm pretty happy with it.
yeah.
I'm very happy. And at the city council meeting, a similar comment was made by a Longhorn and stood up and said,
Wow.
I really don't like orange at all, but went on to say they look really good.
Look good.
So I think we need to be pleased with our plan and the work that Ms. Griffith did.
And I appreciate, Bubba made, a response here this over the weekend to the color issue. Thought you did a great job on that response.
Thank you, sir.
On the social media part.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
He did point out that he would have preferred for it to be maroon, but that was okay.
But
He
that-
kind of worked his
that
way
was the-
through all
He's
of
the
it.
perfect one to answer that.
Yeah,
He
that's
is.
true.
That's why I answered. I figured,
You did.
who else better than me?
Right.
It's perfect. I'm glad you saw it. I didn't even see it,
Yeah.
but
I mean,
I'm
it's,
not a
but,
social
but I'm going to be honest on that. There was far more that looked greats than
Yes.
wine orange,
Good.
and I thought,
There was.
I mean, and I'm old school, but it's okay to have some change. And I think the green is just when you look at them side by side, which one do you see?
Yeah.
I mean, there's no doubt about it.
Very good. Thank you.